Certain metabolic poisons rewrite who you fundamentally think you are. We talk about optimizing your life with diet, sleep, and generic mindfulness, but that's like trying to tune a radio by just changing the volume knob. The real architecture of feeling is dictated deep within our own cells. When amino acid pathways get derailed, those secondary metabolites aren't benign. They act as subtle biochemical filters on your reality. They change how neurons fire and influence everything from anxiety levels to moments of profound clarity. It's not just about having enough happy chemicals like serotonin. It's about preventing the toxic side reactions that hijack the system entirely. A process we call regulating metabolic coherence. Imagine your consciousness isn't fixed. It operates based on internal metabolic tuning. Our understanding shows that simple stress doesn't just make you tired, it actively changes the chemical balance in your brain. This happens through a critical regulatory system called the kynurenine pathway. Think of this pathway like a delicate biological thermostat regulating whether your mind generates clarity or chronic inflammation. When that mechanism gets thrown out of whack, we aren't dealing with willpower. We are experiencing deep biochemical dysregulation. We can now map exactly how these internal metabolites shape not just our mood, but the very structure of perceived reality itself. Forget thinking about serotonin as just a mood booster in a bottle. That idea is too simple for what's actually happening inside your head. Imagine your brain isn't just running on fuel, it's being filtered by an entire metabolic traffic system. This kynurenine pathway, which manages tryptophan breakdown, acts like the internal thermostat of your perception. When that pathway gets jammed up, due to stress or inflammation, the neurotoxins produced aren't just side effects. They become a chemical lens distorting reality itself. Your physical immune state is literally changing the substrate of your consciousness. This means something nobody expected for how deeply biological noise can reshape who you think you are, and we haven't even touched on its echoes in ancestral memory yet. You might think your stress is purely psychological, but what if it's actually a biochemical glitch? Our ability to perceive reality isn't just based on input. It's filtered by how our internal chemistry manages itself, like adjusting the dial tone of consciousness. When that regulatory system goes awry, we don't feel stressed. We literally operate within an altered biological state called internal biocoherent state, driven by enzymes along the kynurenine pathway. These subtle metabolic pathways decide if your brain is optimized or running a noisy feedback loop. Some researchers suggest this pathway only matters during extreme illness, but what about chronic low-level dysregulation? I want to hear more from those who argue that consciousness functions perfectly well without these stringent biochemical checks before we look at the ancestral link next. What if your mood isn't just determined by what you eat, but by a biological war happening inside your cells? We often think of happiness as simply being well-nourished, but the truth is far weirder. Our metabolism creates an intricate chemical balance, the kynurenine pathway, that acts like a fine-tuning knob for reality itself. When things get stressful or inflamed, that tuning starts to slip, flooding our system with metabolites meant to signal danger. This metabolic crosstalk between your immune defenses and your brain doesn't just cause anxiety, it literally alters how you perceive the world. The receptor fires, signaling heightened activity in these liminal states of consciousness. But what happens next? How those byproducts reshape deep cortical function? That is where everything changes. We have been trained by this idea that better mood comes simply from finding more serotonin. But what if we are looking at only half of the equation? Tryptophan isn't just a building block. It is an internal refinery, and every chemical reaction produces waste. The real twist is how those metabolic byproducts, the ones usually discarded as inert residue, are actually tuning your brain's chemistry in profound ways. This kynurenine pathway acts like a biological filter, deciding not just if you feel happy, but what perceived reality itself looks like for you right now. The problem isn't the lack of input. It is how that complex internal machinery decides to metabolize everything at all. We've been told that health is about balance, right? But what if we misread the map entirely? What if our perceived state, the feeling of calm, the moment of deep clarity, isn't just a byproduct of serotonin, but actually dictated by its less famous cousins, those metabolic traffic jams in the kynurenine pathway? Think of it like trying to tune an instrument where half the screws are rusted shut and coated in biological silt. The system is inherently dissonant. This isn't about eating more vegetables. It's about how your body processes amino acids, subtly dictating whether you land in a state of coherence or perpetual mental noise. And that subtle shift, it profoundly changes reality itself. It all comes down to subtle calibration inside your body. Forget generic wellness, we're talking about tuning a biological radio dial rather than just turning it up louder. How you process amino acids isn't merely biochemistry, it is the foundational substrate for how reality feels to you. Think of metabolic pathways not as chemical reactions, but as complex filters shaping perception itself. When that filter is dysregulated by stress or inflammation, your internal biocoherence falters, affecting everything from mood stability to deep states of awareness. The takeaway is this: stop treating symptoms and start asking what the metabolites are telling you about your system's fundamental state. This understanding begins with recognizing these metabolic feedback loops. The full research archive is at jmthomasofficial.com. What if your mood was just a feeling, but a literal chemical reaction? We found that consciousness itself can be tuned by how efficiently our body processes simple amino acids like tryptophan. Think of it less like flipping a switch and more like adjusting the dial on an incredibly complex radio signal. When the metabolic engine is humming optimally, when pathways are balanced through enzymes in the kynurenine axis, your internal state becomes clearer, your thoughts sharper. The takeaway isn't just eating better, it's understanding that deep biological regulation informs perceived reality. Start by tuning into signals of imbalance within yourself. This subtle self-alignment creates genuine coherence with what is possible. The full research archive is at jmthomasofficial.com.